because again, it is the opportunity after the parties have seen the proposed contested case order to speak up, to say there's really something, that I think went wrong about this. And so that's their own perspective on kind of what is most significant, and that's going to kind of guide our conversation. I am going to bring us back really briefly to the contested case itself, and just kind of do a high level summary of the issue and then the principal arguments that were made, and then we'll hop into the exceptions. When we get going on the exceptions, as I think Mr. Alexanderson himself noted, and the other parties noted, there are a number of exceptions that are sometimes broken out individually, but that revolve around a common theme, like fencing or in proximity or no net loss. I'm going to try to group those for us, and so that as we're going through, we'll need to be taking votes on each one of these. In most cases, they'll be grouped in a way that you'll still take the vote after each one. There may be, in at least one case, kind of a grouping that I say, let's hold off the vote until we've discussed, 2 or 3 of these exceptions together, and then we can sort of vote on them together. But that's going to kind of how we're going to handle the fact that some of the exceptions, while they're distinct, may be related. So unless anyone has any objection to kind of proceeding that way, I will dive in here with just a summary of the substance of the case. So again, taking us back just one more time really quickly, the one properly raised issue in the contested case proceeding is whether, pursuant to the Council's Fish and Wildlife Standard, the design, construction, and operation of the proposed facility, taking into account mitigation, is consistent with the Fish and Wildlife Habitat mitigation goals and standards that ODF&W has, particularly for habitat category 2, such that it results in no net loss of either habitat quantity or quality, and provides a net benefit of habitat quantity or quality. So that's our kind of North Star here. The motion for summary determination arguments, the ALJ kind of broke them up in her proposed contested case order into 6 different arguments. The first argument has to do with the avoidability issue, and whether or not that requires an alternatives analysis. Whether we have to look at not just avoiding within the designated site boundary, but actually look to areas outside the site boundary as potential alternative sites. And the ALJ ruled that the rule, the ODFW rule, and then the council standard do not require that alternative site analysis. And so when avoidance is talked about, and I think ODFW has one reference to an alternative, that what we're talking about is looking at alternative configurations within the site, or alternative design mechanisms. So that alternative site issue was one of them. The next is the idea that that net loss of big game winter range acres as a result of the project cannot be restored by habitat enhancements or improvements alone, but rather require physical replacement of the lost habitat land. And so the ALJ's ruling is here was that no net loss does not require a physical replacement of land. It must be a net benefit in quantity or quality. This is the issue that was addressed, I think, by everyone on exceptions, saying that no, you have to demonstrate that there's no net loss of quantity and there's no net loss of quality. And then you have to demonstrate a net benefit to one or the other. And so we'll get into this in the exceptions, but Odo counsel recommended a change to address that, and I'm going to be recommending the same thing. The third argument was that the applicant's mitigation plan doesn't account for or correct the full damage created by the fenced facility. Here the ALJ ruled, and sorry, I'm just realizing I'm doing this. When I'm saying ALJ, I mean hearing officer. The administrative law judge is the phrase that's used by a lot of the agencies I work for. The hearing officer here said that Mr. Alexanderson's assertions were unsupported by the evidence. But even if they're assumed to be true, the hardships created by the fencing are accounted for in the habitat mitigation plan, with the mitigation that had been proposed providing a net benefit. Okay, the fourth issue is the in proximity issue that we're going to be addressing here shortly in exceptions. Again, the ALJ ruled that the proposed habitat mitigation area is in proximity, stating that it's within the Columbia Plateau and within big game winter range. The fifth issue was that that the department and applicant undercounted the total acres of land that will be impacted and thus must be mitigated. Here, I think we may have, I don't recall that this was raised in Mr. Alexanderson's exceptions. The ALJ clarified that, well, the total micrositing area for the facility is slightly over 7,000 acres. The proposed facility footprint itself within that 7,000 acres is going to be just shy of 5,000. And so when ODFW was working with the applicant on trying to figure out the number of acres for mitigation, it was correctly using that just shy of 5,000 numbers as the acres as the basis for its no net loss and net benefit calculations. And the final argument is that is a cumulative impacts argument, and that the project will have a larger detrimental impact on wildlife habitat in the area when viewed as a whole with other projects. And here the ALJ ruled that Mr. Alexanderson did not raise cumulative impacts issues in his comments on the draft proposed order. But more kind of fundamentally, that it was beyond the scope of kind of her, the issue before her in the hearing, because the process of determining whether or not the mitigation standard is met pertains only to a single facility. So those are the 6 issues. And so, you know, again, most of these are going to show up in the themes then in the exceptions, the no net loss, cumulative impacts, in proximity issues. So we're going to move then from there, unless there are any questions about the proposed contested case order, into the exceptions themselves. And so what I'm going to be doing is starting by theme here with the kind of the general theme of whether or not the habitat mitigation area satisfies the in proximity definition. Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
Councillor Devlin.
Just a clarification on the process. And this is not the question I asked you, but if we go through this exception by exception or exceptions by grouping, and at the same time, we believe perhaps the exception should not be granted, but we believe that the language that has proposed at least partially address some of these exceptions, what order should we do these in? If we haven't adopted the language that's been proposed.
That's correct. So So we have proposals from the Department of Energy on a couple of different issues here. And so as we get into the particular exception where that proposal, to which that proposal pertains, basically, then the council in each case for each exception, and I mentioned this kind of at the outset, but that was a long time ago by now. You're going to have options for what to do. So one option is just going to be we are rejecting the exception. We think the proposed contested case order is accurate as is. No further action. Another option would be to recommend, or request that the Department of Energy make some kind of change to go into the final order. And that is where in Mr. Rowe's presentation, he presented some potential changes that were intended to go into the proposed order.
Okay.
So that's option 2. Then the other options are basically saying that new evidence might need to be taken. So the council is not persuaded that the evidence on the record is sufficient, and so it's trying to figure out what to do about that.
Okay. Madam Chair, get a
Councilor
little bit
Devlin?
more clarification.
Sure.
You understand sort of the awkward level of this.
Mhm.
If we reject an exception, but then we haven't already acted on the alternative language that has been proposed. It's kind of a backwards feeling, because if we feel the language, at least to the degree that we want to change the language in the order, shouldn't we act on the language first and then act on the exceptions?
Yes, that's correct. So as we're going through, so I guess what I would say, and this is again subject to the council's direction on how you want to do this, but what I would say is that even if you're fairly confident, that you want to adopt some of this language, just for kind of record keeping purposes, let's get into the exception on which this pertains to, and you may say, like, there's nothing else to discuss here. We don't need to formally reject the exception. We want to make a change. Let's take care of that before we get to a vote on whether or not to reject the exception.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Councilor Devlin?
you mean we are going to go exception by exception, trying to cite the language that is within the language that just has been proposed to us today, and try to determine where our portion of our concern about that exception is being addressed in the time frame of today?
Yes, that's the goal.
Mhm. If we adopt the language, Madam Chair,
Mhm.
it's been proposed, who ultimately determines whether that's a material change to the order?
So that is something that you will ultimately determine that, and that's something that I'm going to be walking you through as well. So we have, again, we have proposed language changes on the in proximity issue primarily. There are a couple of other smaller changes. That is one grouping of the exceptions. I'd like to deal with that first.
Okay.
And then, but that will still leave us with these other groupings of exceptions to have to contend with.
Okay. If we adopt the changed language and we determine that that's a material change, where are we?
So then the rules provide for a material change hearing.
Okay.
And so if your proposal is to take the language on the in proximity issue and say, we like that, then we're going to talk briefly about whether that's a material change. If it is a material change and the council agrees, then, my suggestion would be, although again, this is up to your discretion, is that there then needs to be the opportunity for comment. The council's rules refer to a material change hearing. There's not any further definition as to what that process looks like, but at its base, it's an opportunity for the applicant, Odo, Mr. Alexanderson to comment on the proposed change. And then once you've heard the comments, if your proposal is still to take this or take this in a slightly modified version, then at that point the council would vote to say this is a material change that we would like to make to the order, and then we would be done with that component. And if, let's say, we deal with all that on the in proximity issue, and that's the direction the council goes, it makes this change, it holds the hearing, we're still going to be needing to go through the remaining exceptions before we're done at the end of the day. But that's a perfectly fine way to take this, is to try to handle this in proximity issue first in all its facets, deal with that, and then move on to the remaining things.
Madam Chair, I'm not necessarily confused, but just actually trying to figure out how we get from A to B to C to D. I would suggest, Madam Chair, that we go to, let's say, 420, and we decide whether we're headed towards a material change. And if we're headed towards a material change, I don't think we're going to resolve this today. I mean, we have staff, members, public, some of them from considerable distances. I'm not. I'm only about 100 miles. But I think that at that point, we need to decide where we're at.
And at 420, if it is material change, are you suggesting we adjourn? And
I would suggest that we make every effort to get to the point where we decide to adopt or not adopt the suggested language. We leave it up to council to decide where to make the ties between that language and the exceptions. We make a motion that we want that report back, and then we ultimately make the vote subject to council's advice, whether we make that vote here, that it's a material change or not a material change, or we wait to make that decision. If we make the decision today to make it a material change, then ultimately staff works with members to determine what date is available when this could be done, probably obviously virtually, sometime in the foreseeable near future or at our next meeting in September, whatever would work best. Because I think if we make the decision that it's a material change, I think we will be doing the material change hearing at about 8 p.m. tonight.
Hence the rooms. The question about the rooms earlier. I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure. You know,
I'm not sure either, Madam Chair.
So I say let's get to it.
Yeah, let's
and
just
then
go.
Decide. You know, then we'll go from where we are.
Okay.
Madam Chair, the only thing I would say, Madam Chair, is I would like council to tie, if we're going to go through the language that's in this, I would like council to tie that language to the exceptions.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Yes. And sorry again that this is a lot to try to get through, and it is kind of complicated, but we will get through it. So, so the exceptions that that kind of are around this issue of in proximity are primarily exceptions 8 and 9. And so I'm just going to talk about those two first real quick, and then we can get into it. So Mr. Alexanderson's exception 8 is talks about the yellow rose bush seeking summary determination that the mitigation site qualifies and satisfies the mitigation rule. And so this is, underneath this heading of the mitigation site is okay, is the argument that this is not in proximity. And you heard from Odo's counsel the ways in which ODFW participated in this process, And the fact that ODFW talked a lot of, approved this site, talked about its being in kind, talked about the benefits that the mitigation area would provide. But what it did not do was explicitly say that it was in proximity. And that is kind of fundamentally what we're wrestling with right now. And so the proposal from Odo is to make sure that when this comes to ODFW and to Odo, as it must, when the habitat mitigation plan is finalized, that it's explicitly required that ODFW state and the Department of Energy conclude that the site is in fact in proximity. That determination is going to be based on ODFW's, in the first instance, on ODFW's interpretation of its rules, and in the second instance, based on Odo's review of the information that ODFW has provided. And so that is one option for dealing with this. The other option that was discussed by Mr. Rowe was the notion of and that Mr. Alexanderson is requesting, is going back and taking more evidence on this, either the council taking evidence or a hearing officer taking evidence. And those are options that are available to council as well. The notion of the proposal from Odo's council, though, is that when we get to this part of the process, there is still the possibility that the applicant can change things up. That, as was pointed out, something might have happened to the habitat mitigation area. There may be another reason for choosing another site. One way or another, when we get to pre-construction with the applicant, there is going to need to be this finalization, and there will always need to be a determination that the site is in proximity. It's just that we've gotten a little bit farther with this project than we do with some, where we actually have a particular site that ODFW has signed off on. So we want to direct them, since you didn't say explicitly that this was in proximity, we're inferring that you decided it was because you approved it, but we want to hear from you directly that it is, that condition language and the other changes that are recommended in here take care of that. So that's essentially what we're talking about here with the change. My recommendation is that the council treat this as a material change if the council wants to go in this direction. The definition of material change is a little ambiguous. It's a little subject to judgment, but the council would act conservatively by going ahead and providing the opportunity for comment from everyone in this instance, if that's the direction you decide you want to go. Before we decide whether or not that is the direction that council wants to go, or if it wants to choose something else, I'd just like to really quickly point out that exception 9 is related to this. It provides that the proposed contested case order rejects the only evidence presented on the home range of the affected subpopulation. What Mr. Alexanderson is referring to here is the mule deer management plan. That plan is actually not in the record, and Mr. Alexanderson had requested that the hearing officer take what's called judicial notice of asserted facts that do appear in that document. That is a technical tool. I can answer questions about judicial notice, but the main upshot here is that the hearing officer did not take notice of that. And so the record that you have before you doesn't actually contain the mule deer management plan, and it doesn't contain those underlying findings of fact with respect to what that plan means. So again, from a record perspective, that puts us back in the place of relying on an inferred statement from ODFW of saying the plan is okay, you know, and the department and the council inferring that that means that it's in proximity. Mr. Alexanderson also raised this in exception 1.5, which is exception 1 is I kind of take to be a, you know, high level summary of arguments that are being made elsewhere. I'm going to note the sub arguments made in exception 1 as we go through them. But here it was just, you know, a statement that under this interpretation, in proximity could be anywhere on the Columbia Plateau. Again, if the council decides to go with this approach as proposed by Odo, we would be stating that ODFW is going to need to be involved and is going to need to actively find that the habitat mitigation area that's chosen, if it's Tye Valley or somewhere else, is in fact in proximity using their own interpretation of the rule. You know, Mr. Alexanderson talked about like the difference between you know, the entire species of mule deer versus a herd of mule deer. Well, that's going to be something that ODFW would weigh in on based in its interpretation at that time, and address something like that. So those are exceptions 8, 9, and 1.5, all related to the in proximity issue, all related to the decision before the council as to how it wants to handle the in proximity issue. So I'm going to stop there for now, but this is kind of when we're transitioning into that decision about what to do about the exceptions.
Council members? Councilor Beyer.
So do we first decide on the exceptions? I think in the past we've kind of done thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't know if we've done formal acceptance or rejections of exceptions. And then second, move into the material change.
Yeah, so I think since we have we're deciding whether or not, so the first decision is, does the council like this proposal? As I see it, that we can do informally. The second decision is, if the council likes this proposal, then what do you do about it? Again, my recommendation to you is that you open a material change hearing. I think that probably should be a formal vote. And then we can decide whether or not we want to begin the material change hearing, which can be an opportunity for comment right now, essentially, or whether we table that and move on to other exceptions. That's going to essentially be the council's choice is where to go from here. Do we try to wrap this issue up neatly and then move on, or do we table it?
Madam Chair.
Councilor Devlin.
I would try to claim that I have this ability, but I do not. We started this whole process with a show of hands on whether or not we could proceed with the order, subject to some of our discussion on these exceptions. And I guess we were somewhat aware that there would be alternative language proposed. So can we get Madam Chair, is it acceptable to get a show of hands to see where the council is on adopting this and then making a decision whether this is a material change? I do not believe it would be good practice to have that hearing today, because I think what would happen at this is when you change, in a sense, the framework of this, and we really do not have a established process for this exceptions hearing, I wouldn't want to put any of the parties that are testifying here today in the situation of coming and testifying to their best of their abilities 2 minutes from now, 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes from now. I'd want to set a date for this exceptions hearing or this material change hearing and give people time and the council time. Because I think if we make this basic decision that this is a material change, we need time.
I
Can
think
I-
that's what we were just going to do is
Yeah, can we get
do a
a
show of hands. Yeah.
Show of hands.
We were,
Okay,
It's
so
informative.
I'm just I will kind of present the proposal then. Uh, is it the council's desire to modify the proposed contested case order in a way that is going to modify the final order that is ultimately voted on by the council here to include the proposed language presented by Mr. Rowe during argument this afternoon?
do you want that by a show of
Yeah.
hands?
So yes, raise your hand. Okay. All right. Okay. So then we kind of come back to the idea of how to handle that. Again, if maybe I'll do it even more simply. If there's anyone who objects to the idea of handling these language changes as a material change, let me know if you object, and we'll talk about that. Any objection?
That's a member of
Objections? Councilor Dev, no.
No.
Any objection?
Okay, hearing none. So that's going to be the way that the council is planning to move forward on this, is to recommend these changes, to treat this as a material change, and to hold a material change hearing on the changes. So then our step is, Councilmember Devlin has recommended that this be done at another time to give adequate preparation for the parties. And that is the next decision that the council needs to make. I think it's fair for me to say that I've heard from Mr. Alexanderson and he would like to speak to this. And I'm assuming that the applicant will as well. So I know that there is interest in being heard on this topic.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Devlin.
Should the council decide after hearing from them that we're going to go on to that material change and we're going to set that date in the future, I would like for staff to take this language and tie it to the exceptions and let us know which we believe are addressed, which we believe may not be addressed. And at that point, we make the decision whether those exceptions have merit or not. Because I think that would be the best process in this.
Yes, and I'm happy to return to that issue once we, to kind of present on, once you've heard from everyone, you'll have the opportunity whether you want to move forward unmodified or make any modifications to this. Once you've kind of, made those, or at least considering those decisions as to whether to accept it unmodified or to make modifications, then we can talk about, how any of those modifications would relate to an exception, whether they'd better serve an exception, that kind of thing. So, I think then we're at the point of deciding whether there's any objection to Council Members Devlin's proposal, as I understand it, to take this up at the next meeting, to provide the parties an understanding of what the council is going to be expecting of them, what their comment process is going to look like. And so my suggestion would be we take that up now, see if there are any objections to Councilmember Devlin's proposal. And then once we've sorted this, and hopefully it's no more than a few minutes from now, we can then decide if we want to kind of proceed with working through some of the other exceptions that don't relate to these changes.
Just a question related to that. And I realize time would be an advantage, but is there any advantages other than we take the time today to deal with the other exceptions, or doing them all at the next meeting?
I think that's really to the council members' discretion. If we have time and it's the council members wish to proceed on this, the advantage, I guess, would just be that you're able to knock a few more of these things out before we have to come back. But again, that's ultimately the council's decision, not mine.
And part of it, I think is, we just recently received the exceptions and whatnot and are digesting process exceptions and whatnot. And so that's why I asked the question, is it better to like take the time to do them all? So, but
Yeah, and the other thing, just to throw another potential option out there, if it's at all helpful, I can continue presenting at least on some of these exceptions with our remaining time. The council doesn't necessarily need to take votes on them at this time if you want more time to think about it. But that would be another way potentially of using some of the remaining time here. I suspect that there are going to be some exceptions that we're going to be able to work through relatively quickly. Others that may require more discussion, but again, my goal here is to just try and present your options and let you choose what you think is best.
okay, thank you, Councillor Beyer.
Just a quick question. It is possible that that some of these exceptions will also require responses. So or not. I mean, we have some responses in the proposed language changes, but are there may be the possibility that we need to, do we just say, no, we don't accept that exception, or no, we don't accept that exception because?
Yeah, so you have the ability to just simply vote to say, no, we do not accept this exception. There is no requirement that you provide an explanation. You may choose to provide an explanation if you want to. It could be that the council, so you've had a proposal for a language change on one kind of grouping of exceptions. The council on its own could decide that they want to see language changes based on another exception. I can't predict that, but we've now kind of gotten to the point of saying, yes, we want to head the direction of language changes here. So, and I guess there's a lot to this, but the one other aspect of this is that this in proximity issue was the piece where Odo had introduced some new evidence that generated Mr. Alexanderson's request for a reply. Chair Condon's decision to accept that brief still needs to be ratified. And then the other piece of it is that based on the council's decision to choose this approach of taking up Odo's proposed language, it's my advice that there's no need to consider the additional evidence that was presented either by Odo or by Mr. Alexanderson. And so formally, we should just note for clarity of the record that the council is not basing its decision on any of that new evidence. Yes.
Councillor Devlin, you're
Okay. Would you suggest that we vote on this today?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we've gotten to the point of saying, yes, that's if I understand it correctly, we've gotten to the point of saying, yes, this is the direction council wants to head. So now the next thing we need to do is figure out whether we're hearing from the parties today or putting it off. I think that's where we need to go there. And then we need to handle this issue of the reply brief and the additional exhibits that were filed by Odo. And so there's a housekeeping matter to take care of there.
Madam Chair.
Councillor
Might
Devlin.
I suggest that we move to adopt this? We indicate we are probably headed towards a material change hearing. We've already been told by our council secretary that we have a very light agenda or no agenda at all in September. Our normal practice has been when we have an agenda we can do in one day, we will do it on what would normally be our second day. We indicated it's the council's preference that we are going to meet on that day. The hearing will be on that date. We will deal with any other exceptions that do not relate to this after your findings of which actual exceptions relate to this. And we will do all of this in perhaps an hour or an hour and a half when people have had the time to review. I know sometimes parties, it's going to be trouble for parties to actually come to another hearing, but if we could set the hearing date today and they would know, and we'll probably do it virtually. We have some members that can't travel on that day. So, Madam Chair, are you ready for a motion?
I'm fine with a motion. I mean, if that, and we have the discussion and
Okay,
decide, and then we just go from there. So, yes, ready
Okay.
for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the alternative language proposed by Odo Council. I move that we set a hearing on whether this is a material change at our next council meeting. That we have information from staff on exactly how this language relates to each exception. And that we
Sorry.
deal with any other exception.
Councilmember Devlin, can you slow down? Because I'm trying to, since we don't have this drafted, I'm trying to actually capture this.
Okay. Let's see. Do you want me to back up?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm going to do this very slow. Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the alternative language presented by Odo Council. I move that we set a material change hearing for our next council meeting, which will occur on what date?
September 18th.
September 18th. And then at that hearing, we decide whether this is a material change. We get a report from staff, both council staff and our counsel to the council on how this relates to each exception. And also a report on which exceptions are not dealt with. And we make a determination on those other exceptions, whether they have merit or not. And we make a determination of whether for the material hearing of whether this is a material change or not. If council wants to modify that motion, I am fine with any modification that performs the same thing.
Yeah. So one friendly amendment. So council is effectively, by setting the material change hearing, essentially already decided that
Right.
or would have decided that it is a material change.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the material change hearing will basically be to hear the parties' comments on whether they support the material change or oppose the material change or request modification. So that's the only edit
Council,
that I
that
would
was my intent, and I'm happy with that as a friendly
make.
amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, only because you said I moved twice. It is one issue. You
One
want it
issue.
all in the same.
All in the same
move.
motion.
Okay, thank you.
Can
We have a
I,
second?
can I reiterate? Sorry, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I second it.
Thank you.
I'm just
For-
trying to reiterate for the clarification, so not changing anything.
Okay.
So I have three major elements. There might have been a fourth, which I missed. First is council would adopt the alternative language proposed by Odo Council. This is where I'm adding a little bit, which constitutes a material change.
Correct.
Second, set a material change hearing for September 18th. And then three, prior to that, have staff provide a report which indicates which exceptions are related to that modified language and which are not.
Correct.
Was there anything else that I missed?
You don't need it in the motion, but my expectation is we will deal with the other exceptions at that time and decide whether or not they have any merit.
Okay, I will add that. I knew there was a fourth.
Councillor Byer.
So, Council Ratcliffe, do you need anything related to the other request and the request to deal with the information that was provided outside of the record? Do we need a motion on that?
Yes, but maybe we can take this motion first and then get to that.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Separate motion. Thank you.
I'm feeling sorry for Todd right now.
Thank you. No, and since we have a motion in a second, we have to dispense with this issue first anyway. I'm ready unless council has any other deliberations.
I hope this is appropriate, but I am presuming my vote would presume that the testimony by Yellow Rose and the suggestion for a condition that this proposed language addresses that. Right. Thank you. Or nods that it does. So thank you. So we have a motion, a second, further discussion. I think we're ready.
Les Walton. Cindy Condon,
Yes.
Kent Howe,
Yes.
Patty Perry,
Yes.
Denise Calderon,
Yes.
Ann Byer,
Yes.
Richard Devlin.
Yes.
Motion carries, Chair Condon.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Back to you, Councilor Radcliffe.
Okay, so then the housekeeping piece that we need to take care of is the ratification, if that's what the council decides, of the reply brief filed by Mr. Alexanderson. That can be a simple and straightforward motion. The other piece, though, that I really want to make sure is clarified on the record, and I think we can just deal with by me saying, are there any objections to this one, is that given that we have that the council has proposed to adopt the language presented by Mr. Rowe, that what follows from that is that there's no need to take additional evidence on the in proximity issue, which includes any evidence that may have been submitted in the exceptions process, either by Odo or by Mr. Alexanderson. So unless the council has any objection, I'm just going to simply state for the record that the council has not and will not be considering that evidence in its determination as part of the decision on this application.
So are you putting that question now?
Yeah, I'm putting
Okay.
that question
No
now. Let's just take care of it. Any objection to that statement for the record? Okay. So then formally we have the ratification of Chair Condon's provisional decision to accept Mr. Alexanderson's brief. From a legal advice perspective, I have no concern with the ratification of that decision. Again, the council is proposing to move in a different direction, but having the brief on the record just kind of helps reflect how we all got here. And so if someone wants to make a motion to ratify Chair Condon's decision from a legal perspective, I think that would be appropriate.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So we were talking about, I thought, two motions. One is to ratify, the other is to not take additional evidence, or is basically that the same thing?
Yeah, so the not taking additional evidence, I kind of did just on the record by not having by the council stating that they didn't have any objections to the idea that the council was not going to be considering that additional evidence. So I guess that was more informal. I didn't do
So
a
we don't
formal
need to take a
motion. I
we
don't
don't
think
take a motion
we
on
need to take a vote on that.
So then I'll change that to ratification.
Councilor Devlin.
Just for the record, my understanding, and I may be wrong, is that when we are reviewing a hearings officer's recommendation or his or her decision, we have to base it on the evidence that the hearing officer had, and we can't reopen it to new evidence normally. I think almost in all cases, we can't open it to new evidence. Is that correct?
Councilmember Devlin, yes, the council would need to go through a process to reopen the record. So had the council gone down a different path of wanting to consider the evidence presented by Odo, presented by Mr. Alexanderson, which was not in the hearing officer's record, had the council gone down that path, my advice would have been, you need to do something to reopen the record. You need to either send it back to the hearing officer or you need to establish a process for the council to hear it. So it is legally accurate to say that the council may not consider that non-record evidence in its decision on this matter.
Madam Chair,
Counselor Devlin?
And I'm not suggesting that alternative route. I actually don't favor that alternative route. But if we were to proceed, I believe this decision would still be subject to some judicial review.
Yes, everything that we're doing here today is, and whatever becomes a part of any final order that's issued on this project, once it becomes a final order, is subject to
And it's
judicial
very,
review.
very probable that if we were to proceed and take additional evidence, that would be the subject of the potential subject of a judicial review.
It would then be correct. It would then be part of the record that the council would be basing its decision on, and an appeal could be made based on that evidence, and any decision the council makes based on that evidence. That's all correct. Yes.
Anything further? Yeah, I think we're ready for a motion.
Again,
Sure. So the issue on the table is whether or not the council wants to ratify Chair Condon's provisional order granting Mr. Alexanderson leave to file a reply brief.
so moved.
Will second that, Counselor Byer.
We're ready for a vote.
Cindy Condon,
Yes.
Patty Perry,
Yes.
Les Walton,
Yes.
Ann Byer,
Yeah.
Richard Devlin,
Yes.
Denise Calderon,
Yes.
Kent Howe.
Yes.
Motion carries, Chair Condon.
Thank you.
So then we come to the next decision point, which is given where we are in the afternoon, there are a number of other exceptions which do not pertain to the in proximity issue. There's the cumulative impacts, the no net loss interpretation. Those are subjects that the council could take up now and give direction on. I could just present them. You could not do anything. You could decide that we're done here today. But I have more for you whenever we're going to be doing this.
Well, Chair Condon here. I think like cumulative impacts, we know that cumulative impacts we just don't consider that. There are some that I think we could hear and go through, like you said, go through what we can.
And again, this is at the
Okay.
will of the
Chair?
council.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm trying not to speak. I believe the motion that I put forward said that we would deal with those at the
Oh.
next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Okay.
correct.
There.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sorry.
I missed that part.
yep, no, you're correct.
Okay, we'll just give it more thought for our next meeting. Yes, Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a general question, specifically for Secretary. Do we have any policies currently that address cumulative impacts at any stage?
So go ahead if you want.
Sure. So there are some types of facilities that require some form of cumulative, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting that, I'm jumping between issues. Alternatives, not cumulative impacts. Not to my knowledge,
Yes,
no.
there are
But
one.
There is one.
So
Okay, all right.
wind facilities have a cumulative impacts
That's right.
standard,
Okay.
but it's limited. It's not looking sort of generally around the broader area. It's more about trying to limit the number of roads and transmission lines and other things. So there is one type of facility, wind, which has a cumulative sort of evaluation or effect standard, but it is somewhat limited and it doesn't apply to other types of facilities. But it's an issue that's been brought up numerous times.
So further questions or comments?
Um, Council Radcliffe, as we're moving into this next phase, if we can get a quick reminder of material change hearings. I think in the past we've been really conservative about always offering material change hearings unless it's a little word change or something. But any guidance on that and any guidance on how we should approach the exceptions? Some of them are just sort of thumbs up, thumbs down, but any guidance on this? We haven't been through an exceptions hearing in a while, so or a contested case. So any direction to help us be more effective?
Sure. Thank you, Vice Chair Byer. So so first of all, on the material change piece, yes, there will probably, well, I'm assuming that there will be an explanation in the staff report for the next meeting about that. I don't think there's anything about that that would require kind of attorney-client privileged advice. So that's probably the form that's going to come in. With respect to the remaining exceptions, that is something that the council can ask of me, is to put something down in writing for you with my own advice with these remaining exceptions. And Councilmember Devlin's already directed that at a minimum staff do that with respect to the in proximity issue. In the past, when I have done these, we've worked out loud just in the meeting, with me presenting on this. It can be helpful to have things in writing. In this particular instance, I did not have time to put anything together like that before the meeting, but with some additional time, if that's the direction of the council, that is absolutely something that I can provide. I want to be clear that this council, just like anyone else who has a lawyer, is entitled to attorney-client privileged advice. I would be providing that to you in the form of attorney-client privileged advice. So that would not be subject to public records requests or any other process by any of the parties. The council is free to effectively waive that privilege or not once it receives it to talk about it. I cannot waive that privilege for you. Only you can do that. So that's what I would be providing, essentially, was a written kind of, advice piece on that, if that's what you would like.
I think we're okay with that. I'm looking at Council Secretary Cornett to see what kind of advice you would give us.
Yeah, I think we take it very seriously to be open and transparent. So the times that, sort of exerted executive privilege or, had gone into an executive session is the entire time that I've been here is once. So we don't do that very often. It is an important thing. I think you take legal advice when there's an issue and your counsel recommends that. I think you should listen to them. But I think if it's some issue where maybe it's sort of you're maybe a little concerned, but it's not a significant issue, I think we're better being transparent and open to everybody. But again, I think that's really a legal counsel question ultimately.
Yeah.
And sorry if I just might add one thing. So basically, I was prepared to address pretty much all of this out in the open today. As we got into some of these things, I was going to note for you where I might be discussing something that I'm not sure has been publicly stated as a legal interpretation before, and offer the council the alternative of executive session. But that, if that was going to happen at all, it was going to be rare. And so, the baseline was just, I was going to get up in front of everyone and talk to you all about this. So my expectation, or the likely outcome here, I think, is you'll look at this and you'll say, yeah, we're going to talk about this in an open council meeting. But as your lawyer, it's kind of one of my ethical obligations to say, you get this, you have this tool that is available to your disposal, and you get to choose what you do with that tool. So
I think my intent here to have good advice, not to be secretive, because I certainly agree with Secretary Cornett that we want to be transparent. It's our job to share this information. But if there are places where you think we should be more cautious, let us know. But I think our intent is to just give everybody the same advice. So thank you.
Great. All right, I will work on that for you and have that to you probably in about the time that the staff report is ready for the next meeting.
Great, thank you. And just a comment, I might feel a little bit differently than others, and I absolutely believe we need to be transparent, but I also appreciate the opportunity for attorney-client privilege given our position. And so I would like to keep that open. I mean, that we get to decide in the end.
Yes, that is always your choice. It is never my choice. Yeah. And so, so it will come to you initially in the form of attorney-client privilege, and you can decide what to do with it from there.
Yeah, that was really a statement to counsel more than more than you. You made that clear. Thank you. Councilor Calderon.
Denise Calderon for the record. I have a question. If it would be allowable and permissible to have a representative from ODFW present, either whatever our next meeting will be remotely, it sounds like, just to testify or confirm their suggestions that are on record for this contested case.
So now that the council's kind of decided to go down this route of trying to handle it through a condition, if ODFW were to appear, that would be new testimony, it would be new evidence, and it would be a reopening of the record. So yeah.
So one more item that I think we can dispense with. So on the screen, so shortly after when we did the straw poll on the proposed order, and there was the proposed changed language. So senior siting analyst Kellen Tardyweather, who's remote, pretty quickly turned around the language. So we've had this waiting and available. So since we can kind of, dispense with this one, again, you're not voting on this. You've already kind of given a straw poll vote, but this was the directed language. So I just want to make sure that you had a chance to take a look at this, see if you're okay with this. If not, we can make changes to it. But if it is, then that's one more item that we're kind of done with.
The screen, the letter continues by describing that upon that last, like the fifth line down. Upon
Submission
of an application.
Not the bad, we can barely see it.
Yeah, it's the lighting washes it out, and it's on that side of the screen. So.
And this is for the record. This is Kellen Tardyweather. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. I know, long day. And I basically just kind of lifted. I tried to use the existing verbiage we had in there, but just used more of the language of what the letter actually said. The primary thing that was different is highly interested, and right instead of like comfortable. So, anyways, it's just more accurately represents what the letter actually said within the context of the paragraph that was there.
Thank you, Kellen. And this is Cindy. I think you captured it well there. Does the job for me.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks to Kellen for making that change. So that was all that I had.
Thank you, and staying with us so late. Thank you, Kellen.
Oh, of course. Drive safe, everybody.
And you don't have a 2-hour drive.
Additional hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think we have no more business today. Is that? Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you for a productive couple of days. Wow.
Um, thank you. With that, we have no more on our agenda today unless there are. So it is now 4:09 and the Oregon Energy Facility Signing Council meeting is now adjourned.